Welcome to lesson number 3 in our Special Education 386 course named Early Intervention for Infants and Young Children with Disabilities. We are going to talk about the following items on our agenda. Welcome back, which we just did, and reviewing the assignments that are available for you to bring you up to speed on what's going on, what you need to prepare for the 6 major assignments in this course. A little conversation about early intervention and early childhood special ed, and then we're going to review some high points of the chapters that you're assigned for this lesson. So as far as reviewing assignments, be sure that you have gone already to the assignment tab and looked at the assignment descriptions section on the left side to learn more about the assignments and especially to understand the field experiences activity, which is the 2-hour observation that you need to have scheduled soon so that you can write your papers that are written with information that you gather during that 2-hour observation. So if you have any questions, be sure you're asking those questions as we go. The next topic for us to discuss is I guess you'd say a one-page document or a handout that you have in this lesson that gives you a lot of background information on early intervention and early childhood special education. You might want to stop this lecture video right now and look at that. There is information first about early intervention, and then there's information about early childhood special ed. And I think that each time we meet, we're probably going to talk a little bit more about the differences and the similarities between these two services. Obviously, EI being birth to 3 and ECSE being the 3 to 5-year-old age. So on that document that you will be looking at, you have a video to watch that goes with the early intervention topic. And you also have a video to watch that goes with the early childhood special ed, towards the bottom of that page. That video is about Drew. For each of these, there are questions that you need to answer under the assignment tab. So you are going to want to look at that assignment tab prior to watching those videos. So make sure you've got everything lined up and ready to go so you can respond to those questions. Those questions are you're not going to answer those questions on a separate document. You're actually going to answer them in the assignment tab. You'll see what I mean when you get there. Okay, so let's move on now and talk about the introduction chapter to your practices book. Obviously, we have shortened the name of that book. The complete title is Blended Practices for Teaching Young Children in Inclusive Settings. And this is the second edition of this text. It's a wonderful text, and it's going to really dovetail nicely with our other book, Building Blocks. So when we're talking about the blended practices, you'll just see me list the word practices. When we're talking about building blocks, I will just use the word blocks. Okay? So chapter 1 that you have already read, I'm going to talk about a few highlights as we move through. So these are some key terms that you want to pay attention to. Each one of these terms is defined within your chapter. I'm not going to ask you to turn anything in about these terms, but if I were you and I were a student, I would be jotting down a few notes about the definitions and write those notes in language that you would understand. If you just cut and paste from the book or copy what the book says, I'm not sure if you would be able to process it well enough to understand what it means later when you look at it. So what are these terms and how do they apply to what we're going to be studying? A couple of slides about early intervention. Again, that's the birth to 3 focus. And thinking about the goal, if we could start with very young children who have delays or disabilities early in their developmental phases, you know that we will be able to do our best with their development and at sometimes really reduce the impact of their delay or their disability on their development. So the goal is to optimize the early learning potential as well as daily well-being, so functional activities that our young kids are involved in. So what are other young kids doing during this phase of birth to 3? Well, they're learning to do what? What are some major things they learn? You're probably saying talk, walk, develop communication into the sentences and asking questions, etc. So we're thinking about those typical developmental milestones and how do we support very young children who have delays or disabilities also meet the milestones that they can with our support. And that is how the goal can be achieved with early intervention support. I'm going to let you read this yourself. Awesome quote from a mom of a child with a disability. A lot of depth in that statement, isn't there? We want to take each child as far as they can go each day of their life, as far as their development, what's healthy, what's appropriate, and mostly what's appropriate for their family and their environment. And interesting thoughts there from Laura regarding our development and children's development. This slide is full of historical context, and you got to read some of this in your textbooks. I think it's really important for us to understand early childhood special ed and early intervention has not been around for a long time. If you'll look at these dates on the left side, think about when you were born, think about where we were with our laws supporting young children's development. You'll notice that, again, this field isn't a field that's been around for a long time, this profession that we talk about with early childhood. So just a few high points. 1965 is when there was funding made available for Head Start, which was actually the first program that was funded for young children. So it was the first program that was available for children to go to that parents did not have to pay for. And this was a focus, Head Start is a focus, continues to be, on children and families who are low income. Also, Head Start includes young children who have delays and disabilities. And then in 1975, the famous PL is Public Law 94-142, which was the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. If you don't know what FAPE means, you might want to Google that or look it up, because I think that's a term you ought to be familiar with. Over the age of 6. So still in 1975, we're not providing supports to young children who have disabilities. Not until 1986, Public Law 99-457 added children ages 3 through 5 to the FAPE statements. And they also, for the first time, provided funding for services for children birth to 3. As you already know, because you've already read this and you've already filled out a short table about the differences between birth to 3 and 3 to 5 services. Birth to 3 services are not provided through the public school system, right? They are provided by community agencies. In 1990, the Education for Handicapped Children Act was changed to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then in 1995, our federal government funded Early Head Start, which included kids birth to 3, along with the 3 to 5. And we're covering the Head Start and Early Head Start because, again, historically, Head Start has been in the lead for providing supports to young children and young children with disabilities. 1997, IDEA was reorganized with Public Law 105-17, and there are now in place mandates for early childhood and early intervention. A couple other notes to pay attention to. You've probably picked up on this in your readings. In the law, there are several sections, and they are lettered by the alphabet. Oops. Part B in the law, IDEA, covers children with disabilities ages 3 to 21. Part C focuses only on children ages birth to 3. So you'll hear us talk about both of these terms, Part C and Part B. You've already had a chance to review this slide. What I want to add to this conversation is down here, right here in the bottom left. One of your activities that you will see in this lesson is for you to find out where your Child and Family Connections is, and you're going to have some information that you need to add to the assignment for this topic. So Child and Family Connections is the agency that is funded to provide the services, to house the services for early intervention. So wherever you live, you want to find out if a family that lived right next door to you had a child in the birth to 3 age range, and the family had concerns about their development, and they wanted to have an assessment to determine if that child qualifies for an IFSP. Who would that family contact? So that's how you're going to answer those questions. And the next slide is then about the early childhood special ed, and we've already talked about this slide, of course, but again, you've got an assignment tab where you're going to find out, and you may choose your school in your home area, or you may choose another address or area that you want to investigate. So if a family living next door to you had a child within the 3 to 5 prior to kindergarten age, and they were concerned about that child's development, and they asked you, who should they call, who do they contact? I would like for you to find out what school in your district, in your area near you, has early childhood special education. Who do they contact? I think a lot of this information for both situations you'll be finding out online. You'll look for websites. You may also be looking, Googling the area and finding out what's available. Okay, so those are two more engaging activities for you to focus on. And the next topic covered by your authors is about collaboration trends, and I've just kind of summarized this a little bit here. When we work with very young children, we work in a variety of different settings, but we always are working with a team. Oftentimes there's a teacher and an assistant teacher or a paraprofessional, as well as speech and language pathologist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, perhaps social worker, perhaps school psychologists, etc. There are different styles of teaming that are used, and you can see between multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. We really prefer that collaboration teams work in a transdisciplinary sort of approach. And at this time, I'd like to point your attention to the bottom half of this slide. We have a video link for you at the bottom for you to watch. This is a short video, about 13 minutes, discussing inclusion and the legal aspects and the policy surrounding inclusion for very young children. Also, you'll have an assignment tab. There are some questions, and again, you're going to want to look at those questions before you watch this video, because that way you'll know what to listen for and what questions you need to answer regarding inclusion. Okay, so let's then move to our Building Blocks book, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. So this book is very practitioner friendly, and you probably noticed it's really written to be used by teachers. So you, as a future teacher. So we've got some terms. You're going to see them in Chapter 1. You also notice that some of these terms are duplicating what you read in your first chapter in your other text. I dovetailed these chapters throughout our class, our coursework together, because these chapters complement each other between both textbooks. So make sure you're very familiar with these terms. We're not going to do an assignment activity right now with these terms, but again, if I were you, I would make sure that I highlight in my text or make a list of these so that you're familiar with them. Now you will want to watch the second lecture video.